1:30, 2 o'clock every single day on the Fancred app. I'm glad you're joining me today. We're going to be talking Antonio. We're going to be talking about SB 206 and the fact that college athletes in the state of California may well be getting paid, baby, at UCLA, Cal. We'll see what happens. Stanford, USC. We'll talk more about that coming up. We're going to be visiting with Jay Crawford momentarily in Cleveland. We'll also talk to Robert Littal of Black Sports Online. We'll get some insight into the Dallas Cowboys from Jeff Cavanaugh at 105.3 The Fan. That's down in Dallas. And Vinny Bonsignore will also join us from The Athletic. He covers the Rams. And, of course, the Rams off to a 1-0 start, and they've got a big game coming up this weekend. And momentarily, we're going to visit with Jay Crawford. Of course, Jay, as you know, an OG from his ESPN days. But I also have a personal connection with Jay. I used to do talk shows at WBNS in Columbus, the Ohio State flagship station in Columbus, Ohio, and Jay WBNS television and radio. So we worked together quite a bit back in the day. This would be the mid to late 90s. Kirk Herbstreit was actually on that television and radio. And I did a talk show with Kirk every single day, Monday through Friday, for about 2.5 years. So Jay, Herbie, and myself used to hang out quite a bit going back to Columbus. And Jay now has left. If you're unaware, he's in Cleveland, and he's in the process of transitioning to news anchoring at WKYC. That's in Cleveland, but he's always wanted to go back home. You talk about a guy with an affinity for the state of Ohio. It's Jay Crawford, and we're going to talk to him about the Cleveland Browns. I want to talk to him about a tweet that he put up about Antonio Brown that I thought was really interesting. And we're also going to look at the Antonio Brown thing through the lens of Kareem Hunt, who right now is with the Cleveland Browns. And we're going to talk about Antonio Brown in general later on in the show. I'm going to tell you why there's no way Antonio Brown's going to play on Sunday. No chance. You'd never know that from watching the media, listening to your local sports talk radio shows or national shows, but there's no way he's going to play. I also want to talk to Jay, though, about that Kareem Hunt case. Hunt, as you might remember, was caught on tape kicking a woman. TMZ Sports, our guy Evan Rosenblum, and TMZ broke that. We had even Evan on yesterday with TMZ Sports. He's hopefully going to come on quite a bit with us. But TMZ broke that story. Last year, you may remember, Kareem Hunt is caught kicking a woman. And so in the aftermath of that video, you have an 8-game suspension for Kareem Hunt. Of course, he's immediately cut by the Chiefs, which is a key point there. But then he goes over to the Cleveland Browns after he's cut by the Chiefs, and now he is suspended for 8 games, whereas there was no criminal complaint filed. At least there, to my knowledge, was never a criminal complaint filed. So it's a fascinating situation when you compare that to the Antonio Brown situation. You add in the Ezekiel Elliott situation where he had gotten a 6-game suspension. So we're going to chat now with Jay Crawford here in Cleveland. And long time coming, Jay. We're back on the air together, buddy.
How you doing, Brooks?
I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. To get your thoughts first on a tweet that you sent out about Antonio Brown, where it was a shot of that Vontaze Burfict hit that knocked out Antonio Brown. And talk a little bit about what your thoughts were about that and how it may be playing into what we've been witnessing from Antonio Brown the last couple of years.
Well, if you saw the hit live, or even if you didn't, you've seen that hit 1,000 times. It was more jarring in the NFL in the last couple of years. And really what I did was I wasn't trying to say definitively that this hit affected Antonio Brown in an adverse way. What my tweet basically was, somewhere in the conversation about what's going on with Antonio Brown, we should be open to the idea that this is a guy that's in mental distress and needs help. That was it. I wasn't suggesting that he has CTE. I wasn't giving him a blanket safety net to do whatever he wants.
Or that it's terminal, for that matter. you know?
Yeah, I mean, and look, I think the other thing too, Brooks, was I think what I added in my tweet was I met him a number of years ago.
Right.
And I found him to be a fascinating, interesting, charismatic personality. I didn't see any narcissistic behavior. He didn't seem to be overly consumed. Now, granted, this was early in his career, and he didn't know the impact that he was going to have. I'm sure he believed in his mind that he was going to be an impact guy, but he was just a different person. Now, look, fame and success has a funny way of changing people, and it's possible that that's what's going on here. But I just, we've got all these thumbnail psychologists on Twitter weighing in that, he's this and he's that. And all I tried to do was open the possibility that somewhere in this conversation about crazy Antonio Brown, we should leave room for the idea that he could be this mentally injured here. That's it. And I don't think anybody can definitively say that he's not or that he is. But this is a guy that's crying out, Brooks, for help without actually using the words, I need help. His actions are crying out that he needs help. And too often in the past, the game has used these stars for everything they can get out of them and then discard them. And then they're in their mid-50s committing suicide. And we as a society don't quite understand why. So I just think that we need to open our minds to the possibility that he's got something else going on here than what meets the eye.
Speaking of having something going on, you've got Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, and I know he just had a sports hernia surgery.
Yeah.
But what's the situation with that? And of course, he's serving the suspension. And do you think it's a fair comparison to take a look at his situation? Was he treated unfairly as we now assess what may happen to Antonio Brown?
Well, look, he's got to sit out the 8 games. He can't work out at the facility. He can't be with the team. And that's, there's nothing you can do about that. That's what the league has dictated he has to go through. Look, the league has been wildly inconsistent when it comes to handing out punishments for it doesn't matter what the crime has been. They've just been all over the board, and there's really no consistency to any of it. I know that they're taking every one of these on a case-by-case basis, but, it is what it is. He did something that society doesn't tolerate, nor should we tolerate it. So,
well, and it was on film, that was a big part of it.
You can't deny your actions. They clearly are what they are. And, the NFL is a league more than any other pro sports league, Brooks, and you know this as well as anyone. If you have talent, there will always be a suitor. There will always be a team that's willing to take a chance because they know that if they don't, someone else will, and that someone else could likely beat you, and that team that beats you could cost you your job at some point. It's a cutthroat business more than any other in professional sports. And I knew when he was released from Kansas City that there would be a suitor in short order, and it ended up being my team. Certainly don't condone that kind of behavior. There's no way you can make there's no excuse for it. You always hear people say, well, this was going on or that was going on. Well, the fact of the matter is he had some pretty unforgivable actions that night. And my hope is that the young man learns from it and doesn't go down that road again. But, this is a cutthroat business. And if it wasn't Cleveland that picked him up, it could have been Pittsburgh. So they're in the front offices of Cleveland saying, well, if we don't get him, what if Pittsburgh takes him? What if Baltimore takes him? What if Cincinnati takes him? And the reason Ray Rice never got that chance is because he was at the tail end of a career. We had already seen a decline in his production. So it's easy to leave a guy like that on the roadside because he's not running for 1,500 yards and catching 800 yards worth of passes and scoring touchdowns and helping a team to the same degree that he was when he was early in his career.
What's your assessment of the Browns?
Brooks, do you remember pulling an all-nighter? And when you went to bed, finally, at maybe 6 a.m. and your exam was at 9, when you went to bed, in your heart, you probably felt that you were ready. You were tired. You were exhausted. I'm good, man. I got this. But in your head, you were saying, I really don't know. We're going to find out tomorrow at 9 o'clock when I walk into that.
Now, wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me something, Jay, about me or what?
No.
An accusation?
More about me, Brooks. So I think what happened was at the end of the preseason, the Browns had convinced themselves that, yeah, we got this. We studied our notes. We read the material. We're ready for this. But then you also remember that feeling when you walked out of the exam and you were like, what the hell just happened? And then you had to wait 2 days to get the grade posted. And then you looked at it and you're like, oh my God. Well, all that happened in real time Sunday from 1 to 4 o'clock. We saw that they were a football team full of bravado and confidence, and it was all a mirage. Those of us that went to camp every day were looking at the offense and defensive, the scrum in the pit, and we were saying, don't look at how bad the offensive line is, because the defensive line is all world, and they would make any offensive line look bad. So they'll be okay once the live ammo starts firing. You just kept telling yourself all of this stuff. And then you watched both lines get manhandled by Tennessee, and you realize that the defensive line wasn't nearly as good as we were told and we made ourselves believe, and the offensive line was an abomination. So maybe the reason our defensive line looked so good in camp was because the offensive line couldn't stop anybody. So this is clearly a team that has some ways to go. There's a lot of work to be done. I do think that I do think that it's not the end of the world. But also I wouldn't make plans for a Super Bowl yet if I was a Browns fan.
Last thing, your assessment of the Buckeyes, your Buckeyes thus far.
Yeah, I think Ryan Day is going to be just fine. We still don't know what the Cincinnati win means, because I don't think we know what UCLA is. I think we know they're not very good. So I think a lot of folks saw the Cincinnati win over UCLA and they were ready to proclaim Cincinnati as, they've maintained what they built on the year before. I think Luke Fickell's done a fine job there and will continue to do a good job there. But, look, in the Big Ten, it's all about what you do against Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan. And we'll have a much better idea once they play one of those three teams. I think Wisconsin's a beast. Based on what I saw from Michigan against Army, we were probably too quick to crown them as, the team that's going to benefit the most from Urban Meyer's retirement. So I do think Ohio State's going to be what Ohio State always is. The top three teams in the Big Ten, and it will come down to how they play against Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan, and that's what will decide who wins the conference.
You were a trooper, my man. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much, Jay.
Listen, I thought this was going to be like a radio deal. So I was going to call from my car.
Yeah.
And your producer said, "Oh, no. There's this app you have to download." And so I apologize for the shaky camera. Next time I come on, I'll make sure that it's setting someplace still and it doesn't look like I'm standing on an earthquake.
It was still outstanding, man. You are the best, and we'll be in touch.
Always good, Brooks. Take care, man.
That's Jay Crawford in Cleveland, and giving us the lowdown on the Cleveland. I mean, by the way, how much do you miss him on ESPN now? Seriously. That Antonio Brown stuff he gave us at the beginning was just amazing. And I think a lot of us have been thinking what he said about the Antonio Brown situation, about Mr. Brown himself, and perhaps the Vontaze perfect hit that knocked him out may have I don't want to be flippant about this, but perhaps knocked a screw loose, maybe, when you look at his behavior before and after. Now, there's been people who've said that he's always been a little bit crazy and that the Steelers have always assigned minders to him and had assistant coaches who really, really, really devoted themselves more off the field to Antonio Brown than they did on the field. So perhaps this has been going on a long time, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's things out there that were never reported. Actually, that probably goes without saying, right? But I do find it interesting that the district attorney in Pittsburgh is suddenly looking to open up an investigation into his conduct or whatever it is. He's asking for people to report Antonio Brown for past indiscretions. That's the way it comes off to me. Sounds a lot like pitchforks and torches. And it just so happens that the Steelers in Pittsburgh, coming off that disastrous loss to the Patriots, and of course they're going to be competing with the Patriots in the AFC in the rush for the Super Bowl this year, if you will. So coming up, we're going to be talking to Robert Littal. Now he runs a website, Sports Online, and on Twitter he is BSO, and he is a guy who has been around a very, very long time, and to this day is probably the hardest working sports media member, not just blogger. If you go onto his Twitter timeline today, you'll see nonstop activity, stories on his website. He now has a big staff, an editorial staff. He's covering events all over the country. And so, but he is covering a lot of stories, a little bit like TMZ Sports in a way, right? And I don't want to say, well, it's just gossip and celebrity stuff as it pertains to sports. But I think that to an extent denigrates, because I was in that boat for a long time. That was something that I really focused on, the off the beaten path stories. And it just so happened that it involves celebrities, sports celebrities, courts, but it was in away from the field and outside the locker room. And that's a lot of what he does. But in doing that, he is covering something nobody else is covering. And he's also helping us understand when things happen, why they're happening. And so I really want to know what he thinks about Antonio Brown, because there's probably no person out there who has covered his career, at least from a national perspective outside of Pittsburgh, more than Robert. But Robert has probably covered a lot of things about Antonio Brown. In fact, I know he has, that the national media and the Pittsburgh media hasn't nearly covered it as extensively as he has. But he covers everything. And it is astonishing, the energy of this guy. And so we're going to talk to him about his website. And, I want to get into it. I want to spend a little time with him because he really provides to me a valuable public service when it comes to serving the fan, serving all of us as we try to understand a lot of things that are going on that we don't know about if we were to follow ESPN, FS1, NBC, CBS, all the Yahoo, all the usual suspects. He absolutely fills a void. And I think to an extent, TMZ Sports does as well. And that's something I think I did for a while too, but not nearly as long as he has, or in as prolific a manner as he has. And later on, we're going to talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm looking forward to this. We're going to visit with, let's see, Jeff Cavanaugh, 105.3 The Fan. That's coming up later. We'll talk Cowboys with him. Vinny Bonsignore of The Athletic. He is the Rams beat writer. We'll talk Rams, and we'll talk about the Rams and the Saints. Big game. But let's bring up Cam, if you will, our producer Cam Smith in Boston. Let's bring up Robert Littal of Black Sports Online, one of the OGs, one of the pioneers of not just sports blogdom, the sports blog industry, but of the sports media industry. Robert, how you doing?
Hey, Brooks, man, I'm so happy that you're back. That was a beautiful day when you finally showed up. We were worried about you for such a long time. Like, seriously,
yeah.
We were like, hey, I hope Brooks is okay. And the day that you came back and started doing your thing again, everybody got a little bit better in sports media for that.
Well, man, I can't thank you enough. And I can set my watch to you. Literally, it's like on the ones. You're like it is unbelievable how hard you work. I mean, describe your schedule every day.
Well, I always tell people especially when we started out, the only way that you were going to get noticed is if you outwork people. Back then, you had to get ahead of the mainstream media, so you had to be up early and you had to stay up late. When Sports Center was going off, I was still doing stories, and I still do that to this day. I get up. Now I'm out here on the West Coast. I have to get up a little earlier, but throughout the day, I'm trying to find those different angles for the stories, the stuff that's not out there, the things that hear about, but they can't trust mainstream media to put it out because maybe it's a little salacious, or maybe it's a rumor, maybe it's something that there it's a little too hot to touch. I always put my hand on the oven and try to do it in a way that it's still professional, still vetting, but where I can give people the full story about the things that they're seeing on their timeline, on the TVs, on the radios. I try to kind of expand out on those stories.
Well, I think what I take away from what you're doing is when I see, let's just say Antonio Brown, or I see Kareem Hunt, or I see some of the things that go on that become enormous stories. If people are following what you're doing, that stuff, not only are they going to know why it's happening because you've informed them about these individuals, a lot of these individuals in the past, because you're so diligent in documenting what everybody is doing off the field, off the court, away from the locker room, that all the big networks are ignoring for different reasons. So it informs people, well, hell yeah, it's happening because I've been following BSO and I've been reading about this. And so to me, it's a matter of sports journalism. It's a little bit like TMZ Sports too. I think that a little bit of what I've done in the past. So, I mean, it's not, people can call it gossip. They can call it what they call it. But I think you're absolutely no different than what we see on ESPN. But you are tipping us off to, I mean, don't you feel like, Robert, well, of course that happened. I've been covering this. I mean, that's my feeling about what you do.
Well, when you do the full coverage, you always have people telling you that there's things out there. Something like the Le'Veon Bell getting robbed thing. That was something that whispers was, hey, he's dealing with these ladies that are a little shady. Antonio Brown has had his share of baby mama drama and girlfriend drama, so it's not a huge surprise. I think what I try to do is I just try to give people a balanced opinion, because based on the athlete or based on the coach or based on whoever they're talking about, a lot of times the narrative can be, slanted. It's my job, I think, to bring some sort of balance to the force, using
Right.
the Star Wars reference, is that, okay, what, because of the times that we're in right now, certain people can't say what they really feel, media people, because they have jobs, they have bosses, they have, images and stuff. And so I try to say the things and report the things that other people are talking about, behind the scenes, but they can't put out, in a public light. For stuff like the Antonio Brown, you want to be fair, to both sides. I mean, it's not about choosing one side or the other. It's about, here's the information on both sides, things that they won't tell you about, either Mike Mayock or the accuser. Now you have a full range of information, and you can make an informed opinion on how you feel about it. And I feel like that's really what my job has always been, especially when dealing with Black athletes, because I believe since the majority of the mainstream media are older white males, they don't really have an understanding of the Black athlete, and they have a lot of stereotypes. So I think there's a criminalization to Black athletes, even when they're not doing anything, criminal. So it's my job, I think, is just to kind of balance that out. Like, yeah, we can talk about Odell Beckham's, watch, that's fine. But, let's watch the terminology. Let's watch how we're referring to him, because it's not a criminal, offense to wear a very expensive, watch.
It's remarkable. And I think an example of what you're talking about is college athletes and the fact that they're not getting compensated, which is a monstrous crime to me, hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't get health care guaranteed in writing. And how do we refer to NCAA violations? Of course, there aren't many these days because we're really in a post-NCAA phase. That NCAA logo just exists as a pretense to justify stealing the money of the players. That's the only reason it's there. We're not actually enforcing the rules. But how do we refer to NCAA violations? Illegal. We're criminalizing it in such a way, in the way we label it, that we make it sound like, I remember when Terrell Pryor's driving around a Camry, his mom can't pay her rent in Columbus. I remember I was there, I was covering it. And, one of the Columbus TV stations is tailing him is tailing.
They don't like you
Right.
said, Taylor.
Actually, I'm sorry, my mic's like coming out, but is tailing him, and they're focused on his license plate, and they're tailing him, Robert, and they're acting like this is some sort of criminal act. He's driving like this beat up $1,000 vehicle. His mom, she can't pay her rent. And meantime, over at Ohio State, in the athletic department, you've got over 100 employees who are driving free cars that they turn in once a year. That Terrell Pryor, he created that opportunity for the people in the athletic department. And what he's doing is illegal. What? So that's why I think what you're doing is really critical. It's really important. And I also think, and this is really one thing I wanted to address with you, is just as a practical matter, on Instagram, on social media, I think it's great that athletes are empowering themselves. Of course, you chronicle their peccadillos in a sense, and some of the things that are going on in relationship wise. But do you feel like that there's a kind of an underserved audience kind of waiting to happen for this to be a big business opportunity with sports media?
Yeah, it's kind of a gift and a curse, so to speak. Is that, like you said, I think because they are empowered, T.O. couldn't explain himself, back in the day, like Antonio Brown could. Chad Johnson couldn't get on, Instagram and explain, what was happening on, these Deion Sanders, things like that. And now when stuff happens, they can get on social media. Sometimes that works for you.
I think Eric Reed is
a
good example.
Yeah. So, you can express yourself more, but it also leaves you open to more criticism, because now people that would have never had an opportunity to reach out and touch you can now be in the comments. They can now egg you on. I say a bad example of that is like Kevin Durant. If all this stuff happened with Kevin Durant 20 years ago, I don't think we would have known how sensitive he was to, everything. But now, if you say a couple of things, or I think, one of the reasons he's left the Warriors was simply because of social media. He couldn't handle, this cupcake, and you went to a 73-19. It's good for me in media, but I think it also, in the same vein, makes media think that their personalities are as well. And I think that's really a big thing now with media, is that, the media people want to be the stars just like the athletes. So it's becoming more and more like WWE promos, where can you really trust who you're talking to? So, if something serious happens and, you watch First Take or you watch Speak for Yourself, are they really saying this because they believe it, or are they saying it because they want to go viral on Twitter and get more videos and more ratings? And so I think it's making journalism is getting blurred between, hey, this is, real news, and this is just, people trying to act out to increase their own, personality and professional, money making.
And we're talking to Robert Littal of blacksportsonline.com. You can follow him on Twitter at BSO. And boy, you bring up a good point about ESPN FS1. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who don't watch it anymore, because it's all staged discussion. It's all phony debate, and it's deliberately done. And we've known Skip Bayless, that he kind of started that genre to an extent, but they have doubled down on this as a business situation, Robert. Everything is about that broadcast rights agreement and making sure that Jerry Jones is happy. That's why FS1 really exists, and ESPN has really doubled down. Do you feel? I almost feel like ESPN used to be, at least to an extent, a bastion of journalism. I think that's dead. I think it's gone completely.
Yeah. I think that what happened was, and I think this started in the 90s with SportsCenter. SportsCenter used to just be, highlights and news. And then they became personalities. But, Keith Olbermann and Dan Patrick and, rest in peace, Stuart Scott. But they still had, like you said, it was still locked into journalism, but it was entertaining. And at some point, I don't know if it was ratings.
I think when they started the Embrace debate, when Jamie Horowitz started First Take, that was the beginning. And Skip, of course, started at First Take.
And to me, it's not necessarily a bad thing when they keep it light. Like when we're talking about fun issues. Yeah, you can, if you're, Stephen A, trolling Cowboy fans, like that stuff like that doesn't bother me. I think the problem comes in is when you take something like a Colin Kaepernick and you see what's going on with Marcellus Wiley and Jason Whitlock. Like, it doesn't affect them. They're, They're making their millions of dollars and going to their nice houses in LA and everything's great. But when you have, a million people watching that show and the majority of them hear a black man, talk about another black man in such ways, that only perpetuates these certain stereotypes. And then they can go back and say, hey, I feel the same way about Colin Kaepernick, which may have some racist overtones to it. But Marcellus Wiley said the same thing. They said he's not black enough. So it has longer reaching effects than just, embrace the debate when you're talking about real, serious issues.
And you think about Fox and you think about ESPN, ABC, NBC, CBS, they're now covering up the kneeling, right? And where's Marcellus and Jason on that? But I want you, can you kind of describe what's going on for people who don't watch that show between Marcellus and Jason Whitlock, Marcellus Wiley? What's going on with that in terms of the Colin Kaepernick thing?
Well, to me, it's a very simple thing. And I've said this for a very long time. If you are a black person in this society that's willing to talk, bad about another black person who's controversial for whatever the reason may be, you're always going to have a seat at the table. They're always looking for people like that. Right. And I think that we talk about would embrace the debate. Yeah. Would embrace the debate. It's all about, taking an angle. And I think Jason Whitlock realized early on that if he was, the opposite of Colin Kaepernick, he was going to bring in an audience. It wasn't going to be a black audience, but it was going to be an audience. And when Marcellus Wiley went over to that, a lot of people hoped it would be more like a Shannon and Skip situation where, they would play off each other and kind of good cop, bad cop type of thing and keep each other in line. But in turn, Marcellus decided to just go hand in foot with Jason Whitlock. So they're using Colin Kaepernick as a way to get people to watch their show. Because like I said the other day, like when was the last time anybody said anything about their show that didn't have anything to do with Colin Kaepernick? Like you don't watch their show for their, sports opinions or anything else. The only time I see it pop up on the timeline, the only time I see people write about it is when they're talking about Colin Kaepernick. And I know their producers and people like that realize that. So it becomes Colin Kaepernick, central. And you see that with other shows as well.
All in a negative connotation. Everything.
All in a negative connotation because, and I try to tell people, ask me like, why don't I write about it or why don't I talk about it a lot, on Twitter? I'm like, because that's what they want. Like at a certain point, it's only so much you can say. So if I'm like talking about Jason Whitlock an hour of my time, I've given him exactly what he wants. He doesn't care what my opinion is. He doesn't care that I don't think whatever he said is right. All he cares about is that my 100,000 people now wondering what did Jason Whitlock say? So let me go to his account. Let me go to their, videos and stuff like that. So it's using people's anger to create ratings. And it's kind of a crazy thing. Like I always say, I understand it because, I manipulate certain things for my own views and everything. But when it gets to serious topics, like it's one thing to me if you talk about Tristan Thompson and Khloe Kardashian or an IG model in somebody's DMs. It's totally different when you're talking about sexual assault, social justice, like you said, the NCAA, robbing things. Like there is a time where you have to stop the foolishness and
they're not capable. They are not capable of doing that now.
Yeah, that's what bothers me. It's like, okay, do your thing and everything, but when we're on a real serious topic, you're hurting people by these quote unquote takes.
And I think you can make an argument when you look at the wild inconsistency of what happened to Zeke in getting the 6 games. Then we go to Kareem Hunt, gets 8 games. I know there's tape of it, of course, and it was terrible. And then all of a sudden, Tyreek Hill gets nothing. And there's no criminal complaints in any of those cases. And now we've got Antonio Brown, no criminal case or no criminal complaint. And believe me, I'm not defending Antonio Brown. I'm not on either side, but I find it fascinating that his career now is hanging in the balance. And this woman has not filed a criminal complaint. And for some reason, and I'm not saying that it's conspiracy, and I'm not saying the media hasn't tried, but how can you tell me that we don't definitively know if she has gone to the police? We don't know that? What? I mean, I think that's a product of what you're talking about. The whole thing that you just said.
Yeah, it's an absolute, like I mentioned yesterday, And I understand that it's football season and Antonio Brown's been in the news, right? But so many people didn't even know Luke Walton had been accused of sexual assault. And to me, it's a very similar situation. A woman from years ago saying this is what happened. There's no real evidence one way or the other. And the NBA just, we'll let it play out. Said they couldn't find anything, and that was it. I asked a couple people, I said, did you ever know that Julian Edelman was accused of sexual assault once? No, you don't know.
There was no criminal complaint, but it's the same situation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's they pick and choose who they want to make you believe committed the crime, more or less. Let's just be honest with it. Like, it's a sexier story if you believe Antonio Brown did it than Luke Walton, just because of what Antonio Brown has been doing over the last, couple of weeks. So they slant their coverage, towards that. And like I said at the beginning, my job is just to make sure that you realize that this is what's happening. I think the NBA handles these things, better. Like, if it's a civil lawsuit, if it's just an accusation, there's nothing criminal about it. They just kind of let it, play out. The NFL, because of the inconsistencies, going all the way back to the Ray Rice situation that you pointed out, literally has no clue how to handle this. In any other organization, any other league, unless you were criminally charged, you saw it with soccer, you see it with other things, nothing really, happens until some evidence comes to light, be it a video, be it some audio, be it something so overwhelming. Right now, all we have is someone saying that Antonio Brown did this to them, and it's just as equally believable that, she's trying to use Antonio Brown for money. It's 50-50. So to me, you can't punish anybody for a 50-50 accusation. It has to be a higher burden of proof. But
so we're talking to Robert Littal at blacksportsonline.com. You can follow him at BSO on Twitter. And, when you look back to the Raiders situation, it comes off as a bizarre situation. But John Gruden's bizarre. John Gruden, for this whole situation, he's been totally given a pass on it all. And obviously, when you look back to the Pittsburgh situation, you can make the argument Ben Roethlisberger helped to prompt the situation and the discontent with Antonio Brown. And God knows there were probably a lot of things going on behind the scenes to try to keep Antonio Brown on the reservation. But Ben Roethlisberger said what he said, and perhaps that prompted the outburst and him walking off before the Browns game. But let's now go to the Patriots situation. And this is really the crime, I think, against a person, as far as I'm concerned. In that I've been listening to a lot of sports radio and watching a lot of sports television. And one thing I'm really hearing a lot of as it pertains to Antonio Brown is if it's the Patriots should cut him, get rid of him. Get rid of him. This microphone's killing me. But they should cut him. They should get rid of him because, Robert, it's just, if it's not this thing, it's going to be another thing in the future, right? And then what do we hear? Now, the Pittsburgh DA, he's going to reopen investigations. It's like, get the pitchforks and torches out at Antonio Brown. Let's see if we can, and people just, they report that like that's cool.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's the criminalization of the black athlete. And I'm not, like you said, I'm not defending Antonio Brown. If there's evidence that he committed a crime, my thing has always been is like, if someone committed a actual crime, and I think sexual assault and rape is that's right up there with murder and molestation. It's bad. It's huge, terrible. You should be in jail. You shouldn't be handing over a check. Like, at the end of the day, if he's found, committed a crime, it shouldn't be like, okay, here's $500,000. No, you should be in jail, for that. Now, with that being said, knowing how a criminal justice system is, you can't trust a DA, especially in a city that has some ill will towards Antonio Brown, to be fair. I lived in St. Louis for a long period of time. I saw a lot of corruption. I saw, Michael Brown get murdered in the street, and then the DA and the cops all work together to cover it up. And the cop makes $1 million off of, shooting somebody, 9 times. So I know how this corruption, works. Like I said, if you have something legit, if she has legit evidence, please bring it out there and get Antonio Brown off the street, but as a black man specifically how these things, go. And honestly, when you're talking about the Patriots, I mean, this is not. I hate the Patriots way moniker because it's not like they haven't had criminals on their squad, before. It's not like Patrick Chung just wasn't found with a bunch of cocaine in his house, and they didn't even talk about that on Sunday Night Football, but they mentioned Antonio Brown 500 times. So it's the inconsistencies from the time that I started BSO, from when Joe Buck called Randy Moss a thug to right now today. That's the part that still drives me to work the way that I do, because if I didn't care, I would just do a bunch of fluff stories and make a whole bunch of money and be on vacation all the time. But it's that crux of inconsistency and that crux of criminalizing, athletes. It drives me because I don't feel the media takes it seriously, they just don't care.
It's a clown show. It's a clown show. And it's the earlier discussion we had, and to me, it really is tragic that you have this high-profile show hosted by two eminent African Americans, and they have now gone to the same troll formula where they're staging what they're saying. It's phony. Now, I'm not saying they're backstage or they're on text saying this is what I'm going to say, because I've been in those situations. It's tacit. It goes unsaid. And I'm not saying that they've got a script, anything like that, but they play a role. They know what they're doing. And to me, those two guys, particularly Marcellus, is a role model. He really is. And his accomplishments, Columbia University, I could go on, his background. And for him to throw in that situation, I think, is nothing short of tragic. I just, when you look at the Antonio Brown situation and his career and his life now is hanging in the balance, and I look at the text messages that are released, and this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that there's a lot of people out there who are saying these text messages, they're monstrous, right? They're terrible. Well, guess what? In a consensual relationship, they're not. And half the people who are complaining about the text messages have sent similar, not all of them, but they've sent similar. That's what you do when you're in a consensual relationship.
I lose you? Still there? Did I lose you?
Another guy we haven't talked about is Robert Kraft, right? Robert Kraft, who, listen, Antonio Brown, he hasn't been served a criminal complaint. And you can go back in the archives of South Florida where he's from. There's no criminal complaints against him, period. And that's where he's from. But if you search Palm Beach County, just up the road from Broward, right? He's on tape, and that's a criminal offense. Robert Kraft, nobody talking about that.
Right, it's a lot of hypocrisy.
And he's going to pass judgment. He's the guy that's going to make the final call here. Exactly. And he'll take that case to the freaking Supreme Court of the United States. Robert Kraft will.
Yeah. That's odd when you got Trump,
right.
Your back. But just to kind of go back to the text message situation, I thought when those emails, text messages came out, I was like, before I saw them, I was like, oh, well, they got emails and text messages. This must be a smoking gun. And I read them, and I thought the same thing that you did. Like, yeah, I mean, they're aggressive and they're angry and their thing, but it just sounds like two people that got into an argument. I don't see anything that would suggest that what was happening wasn't consensual. It was just somebody that seemed to be mad at somebody else. But anytime you see anger from a black athlete, no matter what it is, like I said, they always stereotype it. Like if those same text messages came from, I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, because I'm sure he doesn't do it, but like Adam Thielen, I don't think that, I don't think they're reported, the same. And that's one of the things that I think, you do and others and myself is to make sure that we have some common sense on
what we're talking about is these are inanimate documented facts. We're not out there speculating. I don't do that. We're not. And I think, when you have the inanimate documented facts about the Kaepernick situation, the Eric Reed situation, Kenny Stills, it looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It's a duck. What are your thoughts? And I mentioned this earlier about the covering up now of Kenny Stills and Eric Reed kneeling.
Yeah, it's a situation where it's sad because Colin Kaepernick is being blackballed. That Kenny Stills was got out of Miami not just because it wasn't just a football transaction. And I'm all for anybody that still wants to kneel because obviously there's change that needs to be happening. But I want some change to actually happen. And Eric Reed, and I know Kenny Stills is really out there and doing things. And I wish other people reported that as much as they talk about the kneeling, because at a certain point it became kneeling. But Kenny Stills, he does so much work in the offseason. He actually goes, and talks to the cops.
And where is that on ESPN, right? Where are the feel good?
That's what I'm saying. They don't see that. They want to pick, Jay-Z versus, Colin Kaepernick or Jay-Z versus Eric Reed because that's better drama. Pit two black people, together instead of saying, hey, everybody can do something. Like I've had issues with the Players Coalition in the past, but also they do a lot of good work. Chris Long and the rest of them. Like you have to show all of the sides, and I think that's what the problem is. Is like I don't know if it's a product of just the way media has changed. I don't know if it's a product of the Trump era that we're in, but everybody is on a side. Like there's no middle ground anymore. It's like we can't tell both sides.
If you go to another side, you're dead to the side you used to be on. Right.
You're dead to the other side, right? And and this, Brooks. I've always been a guy that was like, my main thing was I try to be unbiased. I try to see the situation, not the player. I try to give people, both sides, so no one can ever accuse me of, being one way or the other. But even now, these days, if I choose to say, well, look at this option, it's like, oh, you're on this side. You're a sellout. You're this, you're that. But if I choose this side, it's like, oh, you're a race baiter, such and such. So it's even becoming an issue for me to try. It's harder. Like with the Antonio Brown situation, I would say 3-4 years ago, I would have put out a lot more information about everything. But now I really have to sit back and think, if I put even though she has her name out there in the public, if I put a picture out there on Twitter, what type of backlash am I going to
LSU?
I'll put a video
as a gymnast at LSU. I'm thinking the same way, Robert. In fact, I had that thought yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought to myself how much things have changed. And have they changed for the better? I guess you can make that case. I mean, I don't know. But continue. I want to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, so it's difficult, like you said, because before you would do these things and people would say, okay, I want all this information. Now it's, if you say one thing, you get attacked so viciously by, that's like I pointed out the Drew Brees doing the PSA for the anti-gay religious group, which I thought any normal person would think that, hey, if he didn't know what they were about, that he should be happy that someone alerted him. But man, I mean, for people that were quote unquote Christians, they had a lot of nasty things to say about me, a lot of nasty things. And I'm like, I'm doing my job. Like if I see things that aren't being reported, that's my job to, report them. Everybody can't just do, the standard transaction stuff. Like you have to get a little bit down and dirty, but it gets to a point where it's like, is it worth my personal well-being? Like now, I have a family. Back when I started, it was just kind of me and I just think, but I have a family. I'm engaged. I have a daughter. Like I don't want to be encompassed in all of the hate and anger that's going on a daily basis, especially in our world on social media. So I have to detach sometimes and be a little more careful about the things that I say and what I put out.
I mean, because I've had an experience where just recently something happened with me, and I don't remember, because I was on for a long time, then I was off for a long time, and I've been back for about a year now, and I don't recall the sort of avalanche that all of a sudden can fall on you. And maybe you said something that wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but has it changed?
It's I don't think it's gotten better,
but it's not that worse. It's always been like this to an extent, you think?
Yeah. I think it's always been like this. It's just now so many people are empowered to just say whatever behind their computers.
But
there's so many ways for people
more to people on a personal level, on Twitter. I think I'm an example of that. When I went away, I didn't even log in. I'm out playing golf with my buddies, and they're looking at Twitter going, hey, everybody's talking to. I mean, I never went away. I didn't change my life. I didn't move. I've been working on stuff. I'm working on a documentary right now that's there's going to be some things coming out about it. That's what happened the whole time. But when I got off Twitter, Robert, my sense is that and especially through President Trump and how, he is elevated for people with what he's done and how he runs the country through Twitter, the importance of Twitter and the personal attachment and how people really take things that much more personally on Twitter. And so when I was gone, it was almost like, well, he couldn't have possibly just decided to do it involuntarily off Twitter. He has this, there must be something nefarious and wrong, or he must be in a pattern. Nothing could be further from the truth, So go ahead.
Yeah, it's you're right. I think it's good and bad, because we've seen social media bring to light a lot of things that people had no idea about. Like, I always use the example is, as a Black person, about police brutality from the almost time that you can walk. So, but you tell other people that maybe never experienced it, they don't believe it, because the cops are always the good guys, right? But now you see social media, you see these videos, and you see the corruption, and you see the stories, and now you're like, whoa, maybe, these Black people weren't just making this, stuff up. But like you said, on the flip side of that, there's also that angry mob mentality. And while I never, like you, just, got off completely, there became a time where I felt like this is overtaking, my life. So now I definitely make, like, I'm saying, I can't miss the story. I was too connected, to what was going on. And you don't live life, that way. I had to get to a point where I'm saying, hey,
I'll miss the story
because I'm out at the movie. Yeah, right. I need to connect with actual live people. You know what I mean? I need to, go to a coffee shop, go to have dinner, go to a ball game. So I started to do that. I think it actually made me a better, reporter, because I just kind of let go. Because I think so many people, and I got some really good advice maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I think I was at like my height of my, I would say my Twitter persona. And someone told me, they said, hey, if your online life is better than your real life, you're not really living. And it hit me real hard, because I had a good online life. I had a good site, but my actual life was not where I wanted it to be. Now it's totally different. I do what I do for the business wise, but I love my real life. And I think that's what's going on with a lot of people that don't even have businesses like us, is that they're more connected to the online life, that real life is almost a delusion, to them. It's like the opposite matrix.
It's amazing. What I find myself doing is the basics in human I mean, when I was totally involved and immersed in the online life, I wouldn't leave the house. I wouldn't leave where I lived for, I would to go out to Subway or something for weeks on end. And so like human interaction became like, wow, this is great. I'm out at a bar. I'm actually at a game. Look at this. It's like wonderment, I mean, but I want to, we haven't had enough time to talk, and I want to bring you back because I've got other questions. I want to talk to you about JC in the future. So can you come back, Robert, and we'll do more of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm right here in my office now. Like I said, I'm my life is so much better. Now I'm out here in California. I'm getting married
awesome.
next month. So I couldn't be happier. So, and I'm glad that you're back and I can come on
I appreciate
anytime.
it, Robert. Thanks so much. That's Robert
No problem.
Littal of Black Sports Online. Great guys, you heard. And there's a lot more to talk about. I wanted to talk about some other subjects, but we've got a stacked lineup of guesses. We sometimes do here on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. And if you're just joining us for the first time, we're going to be here every single day, noon to 2, in that neighborhood. But we'll always start at noon Eastern time, always. And we're always going to have some of the newsmakers, some of the people who are in position to give you insight into what's going on. Boy, what a great appearance we got from Jay Crawford, who talked about his experience meeting and his perspective, and really kind of making you want him to go back to ESPN, because he said the kind of things that I think need to be said, that we're all kind of thinking about Antonio Brown. And then, of course, Robert Littal of Black Sports Online, and us his side of sports media, which I think when I say his side of sports media, it's too bad that it's his side, that he kind of occupies this kingdom, which he does. He's got a huge following, a huge website. He does extremely well, right? And he's disseminating information that you probably have never seen. That's one of the reasons why he does so well. Nobody reports more extensively and provides you information about the personal lives of the highest profile athletes on earth than he does, literally. So when you see things happen, if you read blacksportsonline.com, if you follow him, you're in the know. It's extremely prescient what he does. So coming up, we're going to talk to Jeff Cavanaugh in Dallas. He's on 105.3 The Fan, and he is really a student of the Dallas Cowboys, watches a lot of film. We're going to get into what he knows about the Cowboys, and he's been intimately involved in following the Dak Prescott situation. So we're going to talk to him, and then later we're going to have some talk about the Los Angeles Rams with a guy who's literally out at practice every single day following the Rams, someone who's in the know as much as anybody. Vinny Bonsignore of The Athletic is going to join us. But Cam, as soon as we have Jeff, we're going to bring him up. We're going to bring him up and chat about what's going on down in Big D. And I want to remind you that his appearance is brought to you by mybookie.ag, where they'll double your deposit when you use the code FANCRED. And, of course, Jeff is with 105.3 in Dallas. That's The Fan down there. He's part of the G-Bag Nation, co-host. Jeff is co-host. Man, I got to get a mic screen for this sucker. Do I ever? Co-host of Fancred's Cowboys fourth quarter live show. Let me repeat that one more time. Jeff is on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas, and he's co-host of Fancred right here, Cowboys fourth quarter live show, brought to you by mybookie.ag, where they'll double, let me repeat this, they'll double your deposit when you use the code FANCRED. Jeff, thanks a lot for stopping in, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. How you doing?
I'm doing good. And for people who are unaware, maybe they're new to Fancred because they've come over for our show, describe what you do on Fancred.
So during the fourth quarter of every Cowboy game, when that fourth quarter starts, if you have that Fancred app, you can basically just jump in, and like you and I are split screen right now, it's Kevin Turner and I that does the midday show on our station, and you just watch the fourth quarter with a couple of guys that you listen to on the radio. We're just watching the fourth quarter, taking comments from people who are watching. We'll have people pop on live once in a while, and it's just a really fun way to watch the game, and then we'll try to convince you to gamble. Because that's what we do.
That's what it's all about, you know. I mean, when you look at the Cowboys right now, and I've been watching some of your videos and some of the film, and just give me your overall impression, first of all, about the Dallas Cowboys.
I think it's the best and deepest roster they've had since the last time they won a Super Bowl. I think. Wow. I just think when you go all the way around,
Now, how did that happen? I mean, because we all know. I just asked you a question, cut you off 3 seconds. But how the hell did that happen? Because the whole thing was, wow, Jerry's always meddling. Is Jerry backing off, or is Jerry part of this process?
Yeah, Jerry's backed off a lot. And okay. I don't think that's popular to people around the country. You assume Jerry Jones just kind of does whatever he wants all the time. But if that were the case, Johnny Manziel would have been the quarterback at some point. Like it would have been a whole weird deal. What happened, the best thing that ever happened to them is the draft where they took Travis Frederick at the end of the first round. Because initially they had a much higher pick, and they traded back. And the reason they traded back is, if you remember the name Sharif Floyd, he was available when the Cowboys picked. He was the third player on their board. And so in the room, they're like, well, we're going to pick him. And Rod Marinelli was like, well, no, he's not a 3 technique. Like that, he's a nose tackle. And they're like, well, what? But he's our third player. And he's like, right, he doesn't fit. And so they're sitting in the room like, wait, why are we even ranking players if we're not going to pick a guy that's available that's our third best player at whatever pick they were? So they traded back. They picked Travis Frederick. The pick worked out great. But after that, there's a guy named Will McClay that's basically their GM. And some people may still not know his name, but Will McClay is the guy that was like, okay, they brought him in, and he was sort of the bridge between the scouting department, the coaching staff, sure that everybody's on the same page, and we're not putting together a board that's not even worthwhile. And he's a great evaluator. He finds tons of undrafted free agents and guys off other teams' practice squads. So for the last 5 or 6 years, the Cowboys, to me, have been one of the premier drafting, developing, and talent-finding organizations. And that's why now the biggest thing that people worry about in Cowboy land right now is how many guys you're going to have to let go because you run out of money. Because you pay Jalen Smith and you got to pay all these different guys. Like, when are you going to run out of money?
So that's the question now as we look towards Dak Prescott. So, and I know you've been doing a deep dive and following that. What do you think about that situation?
Well, with Dak, I think what happens in the NFL is right now there's probably somewhere between 12 and 16 capable quarterbacks in the league. And everybody else is either hopeful or searching. And so I think when you're in a window where your front office and your fan base believes that you have a chance to win the Super Bowl, and the Cowboys are probably one of 8 to 10 teams that feel that way, nobody's walking away from their quarterback. Not if you're getting good QB play, and holy cow, week 1, that was awesome. So in that scenario, like, nobody's ever going to walk away from a quarterback. And so now you just figure out, what is the market price? The market price is $32 to $34 million a year. Bing, bang, boom, go do it. And I think they'll do it either this week or next week, and the deal will get done. But it's just a matter of figuring out that number, because you're not going to move on from him. You have a capable quarterback and a Super Bowl potential for your team, so pay the man.
So what about Amari Cooper, though? Does he now hold all the cards? Is that going to give him a lot of leverage that he's actually going to be able to exercise? I mean, what's your read on what Cooper's going to do there? Yeah,
I think what's happened with Cooper is I think he's enjoyed watching Michael Thomas get paid. I think he enjoyed watching Julio Jones get paid. And he knows that his money's coming. Like, the holdup with the Amari Cooper side is that his side's not in a hurry to compromise, because he plays wide receiver. He saved them last year. They were 3-4.
That's why he has all that leverage.
Yeah, they saved him.
It's coming.
They gave up a 1, and then he saved the season. So, like, what are you going to do? Move on and go back to being a running team that was 3-4 when they had to trade for Amari? So they'll keep Amari Cooper. They'll pay whatever they have to pay to keep Amari Cooper. And it's just a matter of when they figure out what that number is. And I think he's comfortable playing for $13 million this year because he plays receiver. He knows he's got a ton of guaranteed money and a really big salary coming. It's just a matter of when they're going to pay him what he wants.
So, but what about all the salaries and how that's going to work with the hard cap? I mean, there's going to be people that are going to be left out, right?
That's their challenge. I was a little surprised when they signed Lyle Collins to the extension, because he was one of the guys that a lot of people assumed was going to be squeezed there. Byron Jones is a guy that now becomes the popular name that's in his final year, Pro Bowler from last year, that it doesn't seem like it's going to get paid. So, you can do all the gymnastics you want with the salary cap and move money around to make whatever fit for 1 year. But there's no doubt that probably 2 years from today, when Jalen Smith has a big cap number, and so does Dak, and so does Zeke, and so does 4 of your offensive linemen, and there's going to come a point where they'll have tough decisions to make. You just hope that you don't get stuck with bad contracts that you get stuck with and dead money, but they'll be able to do Dak and they'll be able to do Amari Cooper. Then it'll probably be the middle class that gets squeezed, the guys that people don't really think about that would be $5 to $8 million players. You just can't keep them. So I think in a couple of years, they're going to go from being one of the deepest teams in the league to being incredibly top heavy. And then the pressure is really on your scouting department, Will McClay and those guys, to make sure you have minimum salary guys that can start for you.
Right, and the coaching staff to be able to develop a lot of those guys. We're talking to Jeff Cavanaugh, 105.3 The Fan. Let's talk Turkey now. This is brought to you by mybookie.ag, where they will double your freaking deposit if you use the code FANCRED. Go online, mybookie.ag. Cowboys -5.5 against the Skins. I mean, that's cutting it pretty close.
That number's too low.
Yeah.
That number's too low. So I watched Washington last week. I think coming into the year, I thought Washington would be one of the 5 worst teams in the league. So, we go in out there and early on taking it to Philadelphia, I think that's impressive for that team. But I think Dallas, this is one of the advantages to, and I wouldn't make this decision, but Dallas is one of the teams that they played everybody in preseason. They went out there and they played football. They got ready to play football. And I don't think the Eagles, Carson Wentz didn't take a snap. So I don't think the Eagles were really ready to play football until halftime. The Cowboys are ready, and the Cowboys aren't what they were the last 5 years. The last 5 years, if they get a lead, they just start running the ball, punting, and making us all miserable. But in the third quarter with the lead on the Giants, they came out and they threw bombs. They were out there playing a different style of football. And I think that continues. And I just think that top to bottom, they're better than Washington. And 5.5, it's not a small number, but I don't think it's big enough. Give me the Cowboys -5.5. Let's go.
Right. Well, speaking of small numbers, the over under 46.5. I mean, that just plays into what you were talking about.
Yeah, let's see. So I've got what was that number again? Give me that number one more time.
46.5.
46.5.
For the total.
Cowboys winning 30-17. Oh, so that's a good number. I'm going over, but I'm barely going over. That's a good number. I'm staying away from that one. I'm just going to take my -5.5.
Well, you got to remember that we got to assess the Keenum performance. And it was a little bit like the Skins. They turned into the pumpkin that we knew they would.
Right.
But then your point is, well, you had that rust in the first half of the Eagles. That makes sense. So which Redskins, which Keenum is going to show up? Now we factor in, well, this isn't your grandpappy. This isn't your daddy's Cowboys. And this isn't Jerry Jones' Cowboys anymore. This is actually a good team.
Yeah,
so,
actually a good team that can – I think, last week they didn't really – I think the Giants have an improved offensive line. So the Cowboys didn't pressure Eli a ton. DeMarcus Lawrence did a few times. But I think they'll get to Case Keenum. I think that the Washington offense is going to have a hard time getting going because the weapons aren't good. What is Case Keenum? I don't know. He had a great year with the Vikings, but outside of that year, he's Case Keenum, which that kind of says everything. I think it's a comfortable win for the Cowboys. It's just a matter of if the over-under hits, which that one, I don't know. That's a really good number.
Well, and I think one of the questions I have in my mind, and I want to get your assessment of this, is Zeke right now. I mean, where is he? Is he close to optimum? Is he at optimum? I mean, because I think that plays into all of what we're talking about here.
I think Zeke is totally ready to go, 100% ready to go. Whatever they're comfortable doing with Zeke, they're going to start doing this week. Week 1, they kind of slow rolled him because I believe he showed up on Wednesday. So that's not a lot of time to actually get ready. So I think he's full go. It's just a matter of how much different is the way that Kellen Moore wants to use Zeke than the way they've used him his entire career so far. They've really leaned on him, even in situations where you probably shouldn't run the ball, because they believe so much in the player. They've really leaned on him. And now that he's paid, that's my biggest worry about this Cowboys offense, is that they may still be tempted to use the running back too much. And obviously in week 1 they did not, partially because they weren't going to play him more than 30, 35 snaps. But he'll be full go this week. So we'll get a look at exactly what Kellen Moore's offensive plan is. And I do think it'll involve less of relying on the running back in situations where the nerds would tell you to throw. Nerds like me would tell you to throw. I think they'll be throwing more often in those spots.
I have my pet theory. It's not really a pet theory because a lot of people think this, but Jerry Jones, 77 years old next month. There's a school of thought, and I know you can speak to this. There's a school of thought out there that, hey, we can talk all we want about negotiating, but at the end of the day, if you're an agent for one of these players, you're going to get a great number because Jerry now is in a state where he could kick off at any moment, right?
Okay, sir, I will tell you this.
I want to hear what you got to say on this.
Last week, we're doing our show, and my buddy Gavin Dawson, he's talking about how he thinks Jerry Jones 20 years ago would have fired Jason Garrett a long time ago. Like, if he hadn't already won 3 Super Bowls, he wouldn't have had a head coach where he acknowledges, like, well, you know, he was kind of learning on the job there and all this different stuff, and it's a guy that he really likes. And he was like, 20 years ago, he would have fired Jason Garrett a long time ago. But because he's getting up there and Garrett's his friend and he's won his Super Bowls, maybe he doesn't care quite as much about winning. So that was what Gavin said. And we had already interviewed Jerry on the station about 5 hours prior. Jerry's rolling down the tollway in Dallas listening, and he called in. And he was like, no. He was like, this old, what did he say? This grandpa still wants to whip their ass.
Now, when was this? When was this?
This was last week. Yeah.
Dude, we got to get that. I got to hear that audio.
Yeah. So it was.
I got to hear that in freaking audio.
Yeah, that was hilarious. That's the 3rd time he's called in. Once he called in,
love it.
BS bomb on us live on air. He said, that is bull bleep. Yeah, so like
what is he doing out? Is he out wildcatting or something? What's going on?
It'd be hard to say. Probably out buying some company. I don't know. But yeah, so he listens, which is hilarious and great. So tune into 105.3 The Fan. You never know when you'll hear Jerry. But like, he's up there, and I do think a big part of him really, really, really wants a non-Jimmy Johnson Super Bowl. It's been forever. He really, really wants it.
Now, Switzer doesn't count.
But so much, Switzer doesn't count to him. Jimmy's team, right? Players, people still give credit to Jimmy.
Because there's that perception out there. That
right.
Jimmy,
right. He wants one where Jimmy didn't build it. This is mine. But the weird part is that I think he's also realized that in order to win his Super Bowl, it's going to have less to do with him. Because it really is. Like right now, it's
you just described it.
It's Stephen Jones making the cap decisions. It's Will McClay making the personnel decisions. And Jerry, he can do whatever he wants. He does hold the Jerry hammer. If he wants to pick up a player or cut a player, he can. He doesn't. So I think he's realized his best chance is new offensive coordinator who plays things more like the Rams and other teams who are running that style of offense. Stephen, be responsible with the cap so we don't end up with $30 million in dead money on any given year. Will McClay, gather the talent. And Jerry does the awesome interviews and marketing. And he's in that room, and he's a part of all their meetings, but I don't think that he is involved the ways that he used to be, and that does give them their best chance.
Last thing, what do you think about Jason Garrett, and what is his role? Because he almost seems like he's kind of out of place.
He's a walk-around. Garrett's really interesting because he's had success. He does have a better winning percentage than Jimmy Johnson did. Like, he's had a lot of success, but I think I and a lot of people point to when he's in charge of your offense, it is very 1990s Cowboys, where we're just asking you to beat the guy across from you. We're not going to give you a lot of schematical advantages. And I think that's why, as a guy with an offensive background, the offense isn't his anymore. It's Kellen Moore's now. And that was kind of a Jones mandate where it was like, tell me what we're going to do differently. Show me how we're going to be different. And Kellen Moore, it's up to you. We believe in you. Go get him, killer. And so now Garrett's basically a walk-around coach, but
the clapper.
He's also, well, yes, the clapper. Shout out to Michael Lombardi, who loves we have him on once in a while, and he will never say Garrett's name. He always just says the clapper.
So he does it on your show?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, he doesn't.
That's some brass in Dallas. That's some brass ones.
So
he doesn't care.
But there is something about Garrett where I think that the culture and the character that he looks for and tries to instill in players is a real thing. That there is, we call him the RKG, right kind of guy. He's looking for the right kind of guys.
I love that. I love that.
He's so generic with the media that it kind of drives people nuts. But he's got a history of being successful. I don't know what exactly you attribute to him. Because it will be Kellen Moore's defense, Chris Richard, and Rod Marinelli. Right. So what is he doing? His job is to make sure that people are prepared to play, and he's a motivator, you know. But whatever he's done has worked. It's worked pretty well. So I don't know how that plays out if your coordinators become hot names and you have to make tough decisions, but he's in the last year of his deal and he's a walk-around coach. I think I lost you. I think I lost you, Brooks. Either way, I love you.
All right, you got me now?
Oh, sorry. There you are. Sorry, I've been gone for a while.
He's like Garrett's like the guy when you get fired and you go into the office and I'm gonna have somebody come in and be the witness, right?
Yeah.
You know this person in the office. It's why is this person here? Hey,
yeah.
Attorney, but he's like a bystander. That's me. He really is. I was watching him, and actually it's weird because you're talking about Kellen Moore, and I know you've done a lot of work on Kellen Moore. But I got the feeling from watching him, he didn't feel as assertive and active on the sideline. Maybe that's just me, not really a Cowboys guy.
Garrett or Kellen?
I'm talking about Garrett.
Okay. Yeah.
Just from the game one.
Yeah, because he's not, it's not really his show. Like the team is his show. And if they have a lot of success, it's going to be real weird to figure out at the end of the year. Because let's say Kellen Moore, who's 30 years old, calls a great offense. Your offense is great, right? Now he's the new boy wonder. He's the new genius. Teams are going to want him. Let's say, just for fun, you win the Super Bowl, Cowboys, and Kellen Moore is boy genius, boy wonder. The whole world wants him. Your defense was good. Chris Richard's been a head coach candidate. People want him. Would you win the Super Bowl and then fire your head coach? I don't know. I don't know what they would do because they love their coordinators. Garrett's the guy that they wouldn't extend this offseason. This is, well, I guess technically you wouldn't have to fire him. You just don't give him a new contract because this is his last year. But it's an interesting dynamic. But I do think it works for them right now, where the offensive coordinator is so young, and now on the other parts of the coaching staff, you bring more experience and guys that are older. It works for them. I don't know how it plays out eventually, but he's a walk-around coach, and it seems like he's got a good handle on what that means.
Jeff, man, I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot for the insight.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great show.
And that's Jeff Cavanaugh of 105.3 The Fan, and his appearance brought to you by mybookie.ag, where if you join up on mybookie.ag and you type in the code FANCRED, you will double your deposit. As you're looking at some of these games, you throw on that green eye shade. That's an old guy reference, green eye shade, right? But great deal, and you can check him out, of course, in the fourth quarter. He does fourth quarter live for the Dallas Cowboys every fourth quarter during the season. Funny guy, cool guy. It's a lot of fun to talk to him. Jeff Cavanaugh right here on Fancred, and he'll be on the app. All right, so jump into the app. You've got a lot of different options. You've got some fourth quarter lives out there. In addition to our show, every day we air at noon Eastern time. So how are we looking, Cam, for our next guest? We are approaching what I think will be an opportunity to talk to Vinny Bonsignore, but we'll get here. We'll get there with Vin here in a second. And I wanted to talk a little bit about SB 206. I might push that back to tomorrow. Of course, that's the law that appears is going to be passed in the state of California, where players who play college football and basketball at schools like UCLA, SC, Stanford, and Cal, this is in California, they're going to benefit financially from their likenesses. They're going to be able to do deals with different companies. They can use their name on the back of jerseys. They can do those sorts of things, the advertising, the Nike deal, the Adidas deal. Now that remains to be seen if those deals are going to be done by those players. But think about what Zion Williamson could have done if he was in the state of California going to UCLA as a freshman last year. That's what this is all about, benefiting from his likeness, benefiting from his name. This also plays into EA Sports, that game. Remember, it went away, the college games, because of the lawsuit filed by Ed O'Bannon, former UCLA star. The federal lawsuit was to achieve what this SB2 it's going to achieve as soon as 2023. That's when this would be implemented. You can imagine the NCAA is going to fight this tooth and nail. They've threatened to kick USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford, Fresno State, those schools out of the NCAA. kick them out of competition. Of course, that would never happen. That's grasping for straws as far as the NCAA is concerned. And I want to talk more about it. We're going to have somebody on tomorrow to talk about it, hopefully, and get deeper into it, because there's some details that do matter. But this could be a turning point in college sports, in college athletics. And if ever an industry, commercial spectator sport, needed a change, needed to come into the 21st century, it's college football and it's college basketball. So go ahead and bring up Vinny Bonsignore, Cam Smith, our producer in Boston. Vinny is going to join us from Los Angeles, where he covers the Rams for The Athletic, and they've got a really interesting game coming up. Hey, Vinny, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And, man, you got a great radio voice, by the way.
Oh, appreciate that. Likewise.
It's so great that I'm blowing my microphone out. But so we've got the LA Rams. To me, I haven't done this on Twitter yet, and I don't know if I'm going to do it, because it's the point where I would have done this 5 years ago. But I'm looking at the Rams, and you're probably going to laugh, but this team, when you look at Gurley and you look at Goff, I wouldn't be surprised if this team goes 500. If this team really struggles before the end of the season. Am I absolutely nuts?
Not necessarily nuts. I don't think they're going to go 500. I think they're better than that. I don't think they're going to win 13 games this year. It's a tough schedule. They go to Pittsburgh. They go to Cleveland, which initially that looked like it was going to be a tough game. We'll see how they respond this week to see how it sets up when the Rams come to town in a couple of weeks. They got to go to Atlanta. They got to go to London. So it's a tougher schedule, but I think the team itself has a chance to be better. I think they're working through some different things right now. As you remember last year, some teams did some things differently to them defensively to take away what they like to do, one of which mainly is taking shots downfield. They are a play action, take it down the field as far as possible type of an offense, and teams were starting to drop back in coverage and stop that, and the Rams were slow to respond. And it started with Sean McVay and some of the concepts that he was drawing up. They didn't really have the answers for that for whatever reason, but they worked a lot on it last year. You saw a little bit of it against Carolina, where you saw a lot of concepts where wide receivers or even Todd Gurley sometimes were running to open spots in the zone, turning and sitting on short concept throws. But it's a work in progress, and they did it fairly well, but it can be better. So it looks a little bit different. But I think in the long run, that's gonna help them. And I think that by the end of the year, they have a very good chance of being a better team than they were last year by the end of the season.
Where's Gurley at right now, health-wise?
He looks good, and everyone that I've talked to indicates that he's fine. And I think that, yes, there will be a plan that's in place to preserve him. But from everything that I've been able to uncover, if you will, it's not to work around an injury. It's to maintain where he is health-wise right now. That's something that eluded him last year and probably a little bit the year before. In retrospect, the Rams have said, you know what, we probably overused him too much. They absolutely did overuse him the last couple of seasons. It caught up with him. There was an injury that he suffered, some sort of a tweak or a big hit in the Philadelphia game last year in early December. That injury, whatever happened in that game, combined with some overuse and just naturally where the knee's going to be after being surgically repaired as a junior at Georgia 4 or 5 years ago, what the ultimate result was that injury was slow to heal. Okay. They feel like if he was in better condition in terms of the wear and tear, that injury would have taken quicker or healed quicker, and he would have been in a better position to do better against the Saints in the NFC Championship game and in the Super Bowl. So they feel, look, let's manage his work usage in games, in practice throughout the season, so that by the time we get to December and January, he's going to be in a better position to deal with whatever the wear and tear is, maybe a big hit that he takes. So far, so good. He looked strong and healthy and dynamic in the fourth quarter, as you saw on Sunday, carried them basically to that win to hold off the Panthers. Now the question is, will he look like that in December and January? That's the big key. And they feel like they have a plan in place to help ensure that, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But health-wise, he's good right now. He's fine.
Jared Goff, we saw him in the Super Bowl. We saw him in the second half of the season after the Chiefs game. He really wasn't the same that he was those first 10, 11 weeks, particularly against good defenses. Last 2 games of the year, I'm not going to say he padded his stats, but I guess I am going to say he padded his stats against 2 poor teams. But when you look at him matching up against quality defenses on a consistent basis, is that what you're referring to? The team's kind of caught on, even though you have the great receivers and Goff didn't make the necessary adjustments. And now we're going to start to see a process. And I know you mentioned it from the outset where they're but they really have to buy into that.
Yeah, and I asked Jared about that yesterday in terms of, if you watch that game against Carolina, their offense looked different in how they attacked and some of the play concepts that they ran. And, he said his answer was, I joked with Sean McVay about it. It was a very mature game on my part and his part.
An adult game,
exactly, because it takes discipline to basically to take what the defense has given you and not
because you have these weapons.
Yes.
You have the best receiver core in the league, and you're just eating your heart out.
Yeah, and on top of that, they've had tremendous success, moving it downfield in terms of, a lot of if you look at historically what they've been able to do on these longer concept plays, where it just takes a lot of time to, for those plays to unfold. You need the blocking, and also you need the right coverage looks. And when you're not getting that and you're trying to force that, which is what I thought they did a little bit in the Super Bowl. And I think that if you talk to Sean McVay, he would that's one of the mistakes that he talks about that he made. They needed better answers for that kind of defense. They didn't have them in the Super Bowl. They're trying to come up with them now. So it'll look a little bit different. And I think there's going to be some wrinkles to iron out. And again, like Jared said, it takes discipline to just sit there and just methodically go down the field with these shorter passes. And he did that, and it was enough to win. Does it test his patience? Absolutely, it tests his patience. He wants to throw the ball downfield, which is what they've been doing. But in the long run, I think it'll help them. And I also think that if you have success doing that, it's going to draw the defense. The defense is going to have to react, and maybe that opens things up downfield.
In a nutshell, because I think the Super Bowl sticks out for everybody with the Rams. Like, in a nutshell, what the hell did the Patriots do?
Well, they had been a man defense pretty much all year. 90% of the time they were a man defense. They played zone defense. They kind of flipped the script, which is what the Patriots sometimes do. And that's what I'm kind of referring to in terms of when Sean McVay immediately after the game conceded the mistake. He was kicking himself after that Super Bowl, and he put it all on him. And
because they weren't prepared for that.
And it's funny because I think there were some things that they had practiced on just in case for that type of scenario. Right. But I think they were slow to go back. They were slow to fall back on that plan.
Play to their strength.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where he as a coach, is, and I give him a lot of credit because he's not so full of himself that he didn't understand. Hey, I blew it right there. I had a chance we had some answers in our toolbox, didn't go to it soon enough, if ever. I can't let that happen again. And he's been very, very open about that. A lot of coaches, they're never even going to go there, let alone then take an entire offseason to work on it. Going all the way back to OTAs, you could see them doing things that they did differently from last year in order to attack those kind of defenses. So again, can they do it? Will they do it? Will they be successful at it? It will be a process, but I think that the attention that they've put into it and the emphasis that they've placed on it, they'll be better off because of that.
Visiting with Vinny Bonsignore of The Athletic, he covers the LA Rams beat. What about the Saints game? What's your assessment of that?
These guys, this will be the 5th or 6th time these two teams have played each other since 2016. I think one of them was a preseason game, but it just seems like every time you look at the schedule, the Saints are on there 3 times last year. So they know each other really well. I think being at home, the Saints are a little bit different on the road compared to when they play at the Madhouse of their stadium. So there'll be a lot of Saint fans, I'm sure, at this game, but it's not going to be to the level that it was in the NFC Championship game in terms of the noise that the Rams have to deal with. So I think they'll have an edge in that in that respect. They'll be able to hear themselves think because they couldn't in that NFC Championship game. I like the Rams in this game. I think they're favored by 2 or 3 points right now. I kind of like where that is. I think the return home, I think the Coliseum is going to be. They haven't seen the Rams in a regular season or in a real game since the first round of the playoffs against the Cowboys. They're itching to. I think Los Angeles is itching to welcome the NFC champions back home and embrace them, and especially against the Saints. I like the Rams.
Now hold on. Now I'm in LA.
Yes.
And I just heard you say LA is itching to welcome the NFC champions back to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Now you really believe that?
I do believe that. I do believe that. I'm seeing more and more Ram gear around town. I'm seeing more and more people talk about it. You look at your own numbers. It's growing. That's growing. They're being talked about more on the radio, and it was always going to be a process. I tried to explain this to people. The Rams were every bit as big as the Lakers and the Dodgers, but they made 2 major mistakes. One was leaving Los Angeles for Anaheim. I know it's only 35 miles or whatever it might be, but it's a world away, and they denied themselves being LA's team. And then immediately afterwards, the Raiders came and backfilled the hole that they left, so that didn't help. And then of course they leave for St. Louis for 21 years. It's kind of like your dad just walks out the door one day and doesn't come back, and for 20 some odd years you've written him off, and then all of a sudden he comes knocking back on your door. You want to embrace him, you want to welcome him.
Prodigal son.
Yes, but it's a little awkward, so and of course, will they ever get back to Laker Dodger status? I'm not sure, but they could definitely claim that 3rd spot, and especially if they continue to win in a strong way. And I'm seeing it get more and more better and better. The atmosphere. I don't know if you were at any of the games last year, but the atmosphere for the Chiefs game, for the Vikings game, for the Packers game, the Cowboys playoff game, and I've been to a lot of big games at the Coliseum. It was as electric an atmosphere there as I can ever remember, and that includes some of the great, USC Stanford, USC Notre Dame, USC UCLA games. It exceeded that. So if that's a barometer, then yeah, absolutely, they're making a headway here in LA.
That Kansas City game, that was a transcendent moment in LA sports in terms of outside of the Lakers as an experience. And SC's had those experiences that I've had in that stadium. I went to the Rose Bowl in the USC Texas game. I went to that Rose Bowl, that championship game, but it was in that category. I do want to ask you though, when we're talking about popularity, I think when you go back to the Rams of the Los Angeles Rams heyday when they were in LA, so much of that was a function of the individual personalities of the players, and they were perennial contenders, always on the doorstep, never quite breaking in the door to go to the Super Bowl. But the guys that on Merlin Olsen, of course, an eminent personality, Fred Dreyer, still around today. And I look at the Rams, and it's a generic situation with Jared Goff, Sean McVay. It's a little bit of the Bill Belichick kind of look, and the Patriots to an extent, not that, it's a team thing. But what about the Rams being up in, I think, Thousand Oaks, if I'm not mistaken? I mean, that's a long way from Los Angeles. And it's almost, is it unfair to say that in a way, and I know they play in the Coliseum, they're going to play right in the heart of Inglewood, which is really the heart of Los Angeles as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But that's game day. But on a day-to-day basis, do you think that hurts them in terms of popularity and connection to the city?
It's a good question. I don't know, because when you think of the Lakers, do you think of El Segundo or do you think of Staples Center? When you teams have headquarters,
but they play a lot. But they play a lot more games.
They do,
and it's more of a lifestyle for people. And we really built around that with LA Live.
Yes.
Now, we really heightened that in Los Angeles, where you don't have. And I think what's exciting to me, man, we got to have you back because I want to talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
We really have more time. But what's exciting to me is what's happening in Inglewood. I know there's a lot of concern about gentrification, but that place is a freaking ghost town. It just is.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Soon.
But I just look at the businesses that are gone, the empty storefronts. It's a shell. And so you can't really argue with, reinvigorating that area. But again, you're talking about the Rams. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of the Rams live up in that area. and we're talking about the west valley, or that's beyond the valley, I guess. But so they're going up there. That's where their headquarters are. Do you think that there might be a disconnect there?
No, I don't, and I think that I think you're going to see when the stadium in Inglewood opens up, and you're not just talking about a stadium, as you well know. It's a 300-acre development. This is going to be it's crazy how big that is. If you ever stand at the Forum, right across the street from where Hollywood Park used to be, and then look, try to look all the way down to Century Boulevard, which is it goes all the way down to Century. That's a long way. You don't realize it until you either walk it or drive it. You're like, wow, this is
like an amusement park.
Yeah, exactly. So I think,
and it looks like a roller coaster.
It does.
Looks like a roller coaster.
Absolutely. And I think you're going to have bars and restaurants and hotels and living. There's going to be neighborhoods built on this development. So I think that's going to be their anchor in Los Angeles. I think when people think of the Rams, that's what they're going to think of. Not necessarily where they practice during the week. Those practices,
their identity.
Their identity is going to be there. That's why I'm always wondering about the Chargers. What are the Chargers' identity going to be? And I think for them, it behooves them to try to find some, a nice big piece of land somewhere in Los Angeles and build, their practice facility in a way that when you're driving down the freeway, you see the Chargers logo and have it be a place where you put a restaurant, a hotel, just develop it so that that's your identity. I think Inglewood's more going to be the Rams' identity, whereas the Chargers, I'm still wondering about that. But no, I don't think there's necessarily a disconnect between where their headquarters are and where they practice. And this as well as anyone living in Southern California, we drive. You might work in Los Angeles, but you live in Westlake or Orange County. So we're used to the commute. We're used to not necessarily living where we work or near where we work. So I think that's part of just sort of the Southern California scene and how we do things.
Well, I can't thank you enough, man, for dropping in.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we can do this again and keep it rolling. That's Vinny Bonsignore of the Athletic. He covers the Los Angeles Rams. He's on that Rams beat. He was nice enough to stop in and update us on what's going on with the LA Rams. That's a team that I said I thought they were going to be 500. I don't think they're going to have a very good year. We'll see, because of what he was talking about. I think what we're seeing with the Rams is a bit of a hangover from the Super Bowl, where teams go all in on playing zone. They take away the triplets, the great wide receivers that they have with the LA Rams. Even though you've got Cooper Kupp back, that's a really huge thing. The security blanket for Jared Goff, the slot receiver, the underneath guy, the Edelman, of the Rams. He went out about week 11, right before the Chiefs, and that amazing offensive explosion. After that, without Cooper Kupp, Jared Goff was not the same quarterback when he played against good defenses. Now, he put up some numbers the last two games of last year's regular season. But beyond that, after week 11, after the Chiefs game, and then in the playoffs, he did not play well at all. He didn't play all that well against Carolina. They got to make some serious adjustments. And can Todd Gurley, or whoever they have at running back, pick up the load, pick up the slack? Is that going to be something that happen? So that's I think their season's going to depend not on the big weapons, not on Goff's arm, but on how the running game is. So I want to address one thing before I let you go today on Sports by Brooks on Fancred. We're here every weekday beginning at noon Eastern time. Had a great show so far today, as we will tomorrow. But I want to point out something, and I mentioned this on Twitter, so I want to address it here, and that is Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown's not going to play on Sunday, right? I don't need to have inside sources to know that. He doesn't have a number. He's wearing number 1 in practice for the Patriots. So he's not going to play Sunday. And whether or not the commissioner puts him on the exempt list or not is immaterial, because the Patriots, first of all, and the most important thing is they don't need him. This is, I think, the biggest point spread in the NFL in over a decade or nearly a decade. I think the last time it was this big was 2004, I think. It's like 18.5, 19 points. That's a road spread. And you're talking about a generationally bad Miami Dolphins team. So they don't need him. In fact, Patriots fans will tell you they don't need him at all. And you can bet if they had a tinge of bias, if they had a tinge of buyer's remorse when Brown was signed, and they more specifically saw the Steelers' 33-3 victory over Pittsburgh on Sunday night, boy, they have it now, don't they? If you're a Patriots fan, big time. And I've been listening to Boston sports radio, and the school of thought is, and I mentioned it when I talked to Robert Littal there, is if it's not this thing, it's going to be something else as far as Antonio Brown goes. Of course, that's to me extremely unfair in the context of what we're talking about, which are serious accusations. But when it comes to this Sunday, you've not only got a really bad Miami team, you've got an Antonio Brown who hasn't been assigned a number yet. He's in practice wearing number 1. Okay. You also have the fact that the civil complaint was lodged in federal court in Miami, where they're going to be going to play, right? And Robert Kraft, who actually has been committed or has been accused formally of committing a crime, and it's on film. That alleged crime took place just north of Dade in Broward County, a few miles away in Palm Beach. So do you think they want to welcome that sort of revitalization of that attention? Hell no. So for me personally, I don't hear anybody saying this. That's why I'm saying it. Okay? I'm not going to give you an opinion everybody else is giving you. That's pointless. But he's not going to play on Sunday, and I have no problem making that proclamation. And I just gave you a few examples. There are more as to why he's not going to play on Sunday. So that's going to do it for today's show on Fancred. We'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern time. I want to thank our guest, Jay Crawford, who was phenomenal from his backyard in Cleveland. And we didn't mention when Jay was on, but he's going to be starting on as a news anchor, believe it or not. Of course, longtime ESPN host. And but now he's going to be going over to news. Jay Crawford, that's right, in Cleveland. And we'll be touching base with him periodically. Browns, Indians, right? Buckeyes. So we'll see what happens there. And then we also had a nice long conversation, which was what I was hoping for, with Robert Littal, to kind of familiarize yourself with him, get to know him a little bit. He's a great guy, and he is covering part of sports media that you don't know about, that nobody knows about, unfortunately, besides the people who patronize the site. It's a big audience and a big Twitter following, 6-figure Twitter following. So there's a lot of people out there who know what he's doing, but a lot of people don't. But he's the guy that's going to keep you informed, that much more informed. You're gonna be able to see things before they happen. Very prescient thing that he does. He was with us. We talked to Jeff Cavanaugh of 105.3, The Fan in Dallas. That was fantastic. That was a lot of fun. Great guy. And then we just got off the horn with Vinny Bonsignore, who is the beat writer for The Athletic for the Los Angeles Rams. And for our producer, Cam Smith in Boston, my name is Brooks Melchior in Los Angeles. And we'll say so long. This has been Sports by Brooks on Fancred.